welcome back. So we're going to have a little chit chat about the books that I read this year and what they changed in my path. So starting off, we have Gemma, The Black Toad. This was recommended to me by my dear friend Autumn. This was a wonderful read, actually. So I did not expect this. I bought this year when I was in London. No, not in London. I tried to find it in London. I couldn't find it in London. So I ended up finding it in Glastonbury. And it's one of Troy's books. It's a first edition. No, it's not. Never mind, ignore that. And so this is a wonderful book about Devon magic and West Country magic and England, of course. And it's just one of those that really, I feel like, solidified my interest in folk magic and folklore. And I found incredibly interesting in this book the connection between Christianity and folk magic and how there was a lot of syncretism. And this was just one of those books that I feel like I wish I had read sooner, because I feel like it would have had a lot of great impact on me already prior. Now, I loved the charms in here, and I loved learning about the charms in here. I loved learning about the simplicity of folk magic that definitely added to my practice as well. Now the next book, I'm just gonna put this in the bookshelf, otherwise it's gonna get really messy. Then, so I feel like a little like cheating, but this obviously had a big impact on my life. That's my own book, The Book of Spells. I did read it, I guess, sort of. I wrote it and then I read it. So I did pick this up in London. I went to the DK office and I picked up my own book. I have an entire video on that, I suppose, on my like entire trip and everything, and how I wrote the book. Though I do want to make more of an in-depth video of like how it was to write a book. How has this impacted my life? Well, I'm an author now, so it has changed quite a lot of things for me, including what I think I would like to continue to do in my future. The writing process was really fascinating, very enjoyable for me personally. I know some people say they loved it, some people say they didn't love it, which, you know, it's definitely changed how I feel in the community, because it's kind of mind-blowing when people tag you that they have your book and that they're reading your book and that they're enjoying your book, right? So I feel like that has definitely just shaped my life, I feel like. And I don't know the exact results of it yet, because it's been very fresh. It's just released in June, July. It's obviously still new, but it's been ever so exciting. And I think a lot of my 2022, when the book was published, because obviously it was written before that, but when the book was actually published, it really just changed my life path, I feel like. Or perhaps my life has always been heading into this direction and this was just like a point on the way. But it was very exciting. It was a very fun process and I'm very grateful for it. So I feel like this really added to my year of just life accomplishments, and so I wanted to share that and include that in this video. Now, another book that I read this year was, well, this one's in German, but it's Neil Gaiman, Nordische Mythologien und Sagen, or Norse Mythology, and I don't know how it is in English. Let me just check in the front. It should say in the front, right? Norse Mythology? I think it's just called Norse Mythology in America, or in English. So that's this book. And this was a really fun read. It's written in like short story novel style, and I've not read the full Norse mythology as such. I do have the Edda, but I haven't, I feel like, I didn't dive into it as much as this book. And this one was definitely one of those books that I'm very glad I've read. It was enjoyable to read, and it's a very nice, easy entryway into Norse mythology. Now, I'm not sure if I want to continue necessarily as much in Norse mythology, but I do find it's a really great one to add, especially because I'm a German folk witch. So obviously this is like a sister, this is like a sibling to, you know, my practice. And so I do find that there's things in here, they're gonna have overlap, and there's going to be certain elements of similarities and things and shared practices, obviously, right? And so I just find that this is really, really fascinating. And I really, really enjoyed this book for that. And so, yeah, I feel like I understand the stories better with this just because of the style of writing, because it was written in like a novel style and story style, almost in a way where you could give this to like a child, like it depends on the age range, obviously. But I would gift this, for example, to my 12-year-old self, and I wouldn't have had issues with reading it. It's very easy to read. It's very child-friendly, is what I'm trying to say. And so it's just a fun, enjoyable read. Now we are going to, let me see. Let's start with this one. This one is the opposite of the previous one. This one is academic. This one is difficult to read. Queens of the Wild, Pagan Goddesses in Christian Europe, an Investigation by Ronald Hutton. Now, I was so excited for this book, and I do love this book. I feel like this is the type of book that I feel like everyone needs to read, because it's very, I feel like, questions a lot of what we think we know as witchcraft practitioners. Like, it questions a lot of things that we thought and have taken for granted in witchcraft practices, especially surrounding pagan survival and surviving paganism. And I also obviously really enjoyed the dives into the 3 ancient goddesses, the pagan goddesses that maybe aren't quite so ancient. And so obviously one that I really was excited to read about was my goddess that I venerate. So we have the Cailleach in here, we have the fairy queen in here, and we have the, I think he calls her the Lady of the Night, which is Holle or Hulda. I prefer to call her Hulda. Perchta, Hulda, Holle, Berchta. And there's an entire just section on her, which I really appreciated. But yeah, this book was great. I've also got like only one little tab in here though. I do have some notes in here, and I've taken this book with me everywhere. It did take me a long time to read because it's very intense. It's academic, right? He's a historian, so it's going to be academic. Sourcing is amazing, really, really great for you to further do your own research. And I feel like I just needed this because I feel like this one was one of those books that kind of questioned a lot of things that I believed in, where I was like, oh my gosh, I had a lot of revelation moments with this book, and I love that because I feel like it's really changed how I view certain things, and I don't like being stagnant, and so I feel like this really helped me with that. Let me just pop that away. The next book is The Witch's Path by Thorn. Mooney. Now I love Thorn. I love everything that Thorn puts out, and this was no exception. This was a really great book. I'm gonna keep that. And so this was a really, really great one because I feel like this book had a really interesting perspective for advancing. It even says advancing your craft at every level. So I would say this is not a beginner book, and I believe Thorn does make that disclaimer at the beginning of the book, though I don't want to promise that because I'm not sure anymore. It's been a few months since I've read it. But this was just a very beautiful book to read for someone who has been practicing for a while and does feel a little bit burned out or does feel a little bit stagnant, and we're just kind of like, what do I do now, you know? Like, I know the basics. How many basic beginner books am I going to read? This one is really, really great for that. And I feel like this one had a lot of things in here that I found wonderful and I have implemented into my practice. It talks about devotion, which I love. It talks about a couple of parts of practicing, exercises, ideas, studies, and just topics that I feel like are wonderful even for a beginner to read eventually once they've settled down, let's say. Yeah, I really just appreciated this book for more advanced practitioners and for someone who might be feeling a little bit stuck or might be feeling a little bit burned out. So really, really wonderful book as well. I'm just gonna pop that down here for now. Now, the next two, and I've just filmed the review for this book here. The other book is by Corinne, Plants of the Devil. Now, this might be my favorite book I've read all year. Maybe my favorite book in all of my witchcraft books, which I feel like is an interesting choice perhaps, because it's not necessarily a huge, crazy revelation type of book, but it was just, I've read this book and I couldn't put it down, and it was gripping me. And I feel like this book really showed me where my focus in my future and my path should lie, because I really enjoyed it. And I was like, oh my gosh, this topic has just encapsulated everything that I love and enjoy about witchcraft. You know, we're talking about folklore, we're talking about plants and nightshades, and I'm really like interested by the more darker plants, let's say. And there's just a lot of, and then, you know, obviously the topics of the devil and the different ways that he has been used in European lore. And I think I'm gonna have to really continue reading Corinne books, because her writing style also, it was just so wonderful to read. I feel like it was approachable, it was easy yet academic. We have wonderful sourcing, once again, wonderful rabbit hole style, you know, reading material that I just could not put this book down. And I think this is going to be the book that I'm going to hold very near and dear to my heart, and I'm so excited to read her other books. So yeah, loved it. And I feel like this really had an impact on my practice too, because I feel like this one was the book that I read before I started reading a couple of other books that really started getting me more and more into spirit flight and more folklore too. Like there's definitely folklore in here that obviously it's obviously plant orientated, but it just, I can't tell you. It's just very hard for me to express sometimes how much I really enjoyed and found this book wonderful in my practice, and I feel like it's definitely going to have a huge impact on my practice in the future as well. And then the last book, and I've just made a review about it, is by Moonlight and Spirit Flight by Michael Howard. Now this is a 69-page book, so it's easy to read, it's very quick to get through, and this one was just once again very similar to the previous book. I actually bought these together and I just read it now. So this one I read at the beginning of the year, this one at the end of the year, and it was a great one to end the year with. I feel like this one was one of those books that I ask my ancestors, gosh, I really am looking into this topic, but I'm having a hard time finding what I'm looking for. And then I look at my bookshelf and I'm like, this book, I haven't read this book yet. I've bought it months ago, but I haven't read it. And I was just grabbing it out of my bookshelf and looking at it and like, this is exactly, you know, the topic that I'm really, really interested in and really, really like trying to find more on. Thank you, ancestors, for guiding me and my hand to picking this book out of my bookshelf. So this was a very just fascinating book once again about folklore, and just in a way, I feel like this has just deepened my confirmation of how interesting I find this topic, and that for the next year, I'm certainly going to be delving more into this topic, and it's kind of ignited my passion a little bit more as well. I'm now reading Sabbath, The Witch's Sabbath by Hutton, which of course is very leaning into that topic once again, and I definitely see myself just going down that rabbit hole further and further. And yeah, so those were the books that I've read this year, at least witchcraft books. I'm sure I'm missing one or two. I actually just remembered I'm definitely missing one or two, but they are in German, so you know, I might be doing a video on my German witchcraft books if you so would like. But yeah, so I think it was a very magical year for me for sure, with the launch of my book, or the publishing of my book, the republishing or launching of my Patreon, and doing workshops on my Patreon, and we just had a really great time, I think, this year. So with that being said, I want to thank everyone for being here with me, and I hope you enjoyed this video, and let me know what books you read this year and how they impacted your practice. I would love to see your book lists and perhaps pick one up or two as well myself. So with that being said, thank you so much. Let's be bye.